Everyone said the devastating flash flood that left Eleanor Wilson paralyzed from the waist down at age 17 would force her family to abandon their drought-stricken farm in rural Arizona. They couldn't have been more wrong. After discovering an ancient underground river system beneath her property and transforming the land into a thriving sustainable agriculture cooperative, Eleanor faced off against powerful development corporation Horizon Industries, only to encounter something far more dangerous than any natural disaster: corporate greed that would lead to an unforgettable battle over the future of an entire region. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The relentless Arizona sun beat down on the parched landscape of Saguaro Valley, where cracked earth stretched toward distant mountains in a testament to 5 years of devastating drought. Eleanor Wilson, now 32, maneuvered her all-terrain wheelchair between rows of thriving vegetables, a verdant miracle in the midst of the water-starved region. The gentle hum of precisely calibrated drip irrigation systems mixed with the excited chatter of community volunteers, a symphony of resilience that always brought a smile to her face. Through the large windows of the modern community center, she could see her mother's old truck still parked by the original farmhouse, now transformed into administrative offices that coordinated water management training programs for farmers across 3 counties. 15 years ago, most people thought the Wilson family farm would become another dusty casualty of climate change, along with Eleanor's dreams of walking again. The flash flood that had swept her away while checking irrigation lines had taken more than her mobility. It had taken her parents' hope for the family's future. "Maybe we should sell to those developers," her father had whispered in the hospital corridor, thinking she was asleep. "They've been after the land for years." Those words had kindled a fierce determination in Eleanor's heart that still burned bright today. The local farming community had watched with a mixture of pity and skepticism as she finished high school from her wheelchair, then pursued degrees in hydrogeology and sustainable agriculture through scholarships and pure stubbornness. "Poor Jack Wilson's daughter," they would whisper at county meetings, trying to save that worthless dust bowl from a wheelchair. But Eleanor had learned early that pity was just another form of dismissal, and she thrived on proving doubters wrong. Through innovative water conservation techniques, community-supported agriculture programs, and an unwavering vision, she had transformed their modest 80-acre farm into a 500-acre community agricultural cooperative that now provided fresh produce to food-insecure communities throughout the Southwest. Her latest innovation, a revolutionary aquifer monitoring system that had led to the discovery of an ancient underground river flowing deep beneath their property, had earned her the nickname the Water Witch in agricultural circles. The sophisticated system, which she had developed with a team of university researchers and patented 2 years ago, was now being implemented by drought-affected communities across the American Southwest and as far away as Australia. Eleanor paused by the soil testing station, where Dr. Maya Rodriguez, her head agronomist, was examining the latest samples from their experimental drought-resistant corn plots. "The nitrogen levels are perfect," Maya reported, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "And water retention is 40% better than commercial varieties. This could be revolutionary for small-scale farmers in water-stressed regions." Eleanor nodded, remembering how Maya had been one of the few who had believed in her vision from the start, leaving a prestigious position at an agricultural giant to join Saguaro Valley Cooperative when it was still just an ambitious dream, fueled by Eleanor's stubborn refusal to give up on her family's land. But Eleanor's next challenge wasn't about farming techniques, it was about protecting what they'd built. Managing the cooperative's expanding operations and fending off increasingly aggressive acquisition attempts from Horizon Industries had become a full-time job beyond her agricultural responsibilities. The discovery of the underground river had only intensified the corporation's interest in their land. After months of research and preparation, she had finally scheduled a meeting with the State Water Resources Board to present her plan for sustainable management of the newly discovered aquifer, a plan that would benefit the entire region rather than just corporate interests. Her proposal would require significant public funding, but the economic and social returns would transform the future of the drought-plagued valley. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Maya asked, setting down her soil samples. She had been by Eleanor's side through countless public meetings where officials had initially dismissed her boss, only to leave impressed by her expertise and determination. "Some battles need to be fought alone," Eleanor replied, adjusting her tailored blazer. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a turquoise blouse that matched the colors of the Southwest landscape, paired with a professional gray suit that spoke of competence without pretension. In her world, appearance mattered not because of vanity, but because it was often the first line of defense against prejudice. What Eleanor didn't know as she finalized her presentation was that her visit to the Water Resources Board would trigger a chain of events that would not only challenge her resilience, but also change the way people viewed environmental stewardship forever. The same determination that had transformed a failing farm into an agricultural innovation hub was about to teach the world another lesson about the power of community over corporate greed. As she prepared to leave for her appointment, Eleanor caught her reflection in the polished glass of the community center doors. The morning sun had broken through a rare cloud, illuminating row upon row of thriving crops, living proof that with the right vision, any crisis could be transformed into an opportunity. After all, true success isn't measured by personal gain, but by how many lives you improve along the way. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The harsh desert sun had climbed higher by the time Eleanor's customized truck pulled out of the cooperative's gates. The property's transformation over the past decade was nothing short of extraordinary. Where there had once been dusty fields and failing crops, now stood a model of sustainable agriculture and water conservation. The morning light glinted off solar panels that powered the precision irrigation systems, another of Eleanor's forward-thinking installations that had cut their water usage by 70%. Carlos, her assistant and driver for the past 4 years, navigated the truck through the winding roads of Saguaro Valley. He had been a hydrology student when Eleanor hired him, and his scientific background complemented her practical farming experience perfectly. "The weather report for Phoenix looks clear, Ms. Wilson," he reported, knowing her preference for staying informed. "We should arrive at the Water Resources Board headquarters well ahead of schedule." Eleanor smiled, remembering how she'd found Carlos. He had been one of the few applicants who had focused on her innovations rather than her wheelchair during the interview. "Perfect timing as always, Carlos," she replied, opening her tablet to review her presentation one last time. The comprehensive water management plan she had developed would not only protect the underground river, but would also create a sustainable distribution system that could revitalize farming across the entire county. Through the truck's windows, she watched other farms pass by, many of them struggling with the ongoing drought. Several had already been sold to Horizon Industries, their once productive fields now sitting empty as the corporation held the land for future development. Those same farmers had initially scoffed at Eleanor's water conservation methods, calling them impractical. Now those who remained were on her waiting list for consultation services. Her innovative approach had been born from necessity. Traditional farming methods were water-intensive and increasingly unsustainable in the changing climate. So she had developed systems that worked with nature rather than against it, incorporating indigenous knowledge about desert agriculture alongside cutting-edge technology. The approach had accidentally solved 2 major regional problems: water scarcity and food insecurity. Her phone buzzed with a message from Professor Sandra Diaz, her mentor from the University of Arizona and early supporter. Heard about the board meeting. They don't know what's about to hit them. Show them what Saguaro Valley is made of. Eleanor grinned, remembering the day she had first shared her underground river discovery with the professor. The academic had expected interesting research findings. Instead, Eleanor had presented a revolutionary community water management concept complete with geological surveys, sustainability metrics, and economic impact projections. Sandra had helped secure the university's partnership on the spot. The truck passed the site of her accident, now marked by a modern water monitoring station that tracked the seasonal washes that could transform from dusty arroyos to raging torrents within minutes of a desert cloudburst. The outdated flood control system that had failed catastrophically during her accident had been replaced by a network of retention basins and channels she had designed with flood management experts, protecting both the land and its people. Every year, Eleanor spoke to environmental engineering students about the importance of incorporating climate resilience and accessibility into rural infrastructure. Innovation, she always told them, often comes from necessity. Eleanor adjusted. Her posture in her wheelchair, a habit she had developed over years of public presentations. The chair itself was a custom design with specialized suspension for off-road farm work, yet sleek enough for professional settings. It allowed her to navigate both the rugged terrain of her farm and the sometimes equally treacherous landscape of government offices and corporate boardrooms. The lightweight titanium frame was painted a deep turquoise that matched her blouse, making the chair look more like a piece of performance equipment than a medical necessity. After years of being defined by her disability in others' eyes, she had learned to integrate it into her identity on her own terms. As they approached Phoenix, Eleanor thought about her parents. After her accident, her father Jack had fallen into a deep depression, convinced he had failed to protect his only child. It had taken years of success and her mother Helen's unwavering support to help him see that the accident hadn't ended their dream, it had transformed it. Now at 68, he still walked the fields every morning, proudly showing visitors the innovations his daughter had brought to their family legacy. The latest satellite imagery on her tablet showed the vast underground river system they had discovered. Using ground-penetrating radar and advanced hydrogeological modeling, Eleanor's team had mapped an extensive aquifer network that extended throughout the valley. Properly managed, it could provide sustainable water for agriculture while maintaining ecological balance, but exploited carelessly, it could be depleted within a generation. Horizon Industries wanted that water. Their plans for massive housing developments and water-intensive industries would drain the aquifer for short-term profit, leaving the region more drought-vulnerable than before. Eleanor's plan, by contrast, would establish a community-managed water trust that would ensure sustainable access for small farmers, existing communities, and natural ecosystems alike. Carlos smoothly merged onto the highway leading to downtown Phoenix, where the Arizona Water Resources Board headquarters dominated the skyline with its distinctive blue glass facade. "We're about 15 minutes out, Ms. Wilson," he announced. "Would you like to review your speaking notes again?" Eleanor closed her tablet, her mind already focused on the upcoming meeting. "No need, Carlos. Let's focus on this first." She had learned to trust her preparation while remaining adaptable for unexpected challenges. Her wheelchair had taught her that flexibility was just as important as planning. Through the windshield, she could see the Phoenix skyline shimmering. In the heat haze, each skyscraper representing institutions and corporations that held tremendous power over the region's future. The Water Resources Board, with its mandate to manage the state's most precious resource, was perhaps the most powerful of all in this arid landscape. Eleanor thought about all the small farmers and rural community members who were counting on her. This presentation wasn't just about securing funding for their cooperative. It was about establishing the precedent for community-based resource Management over corporate exploitation. As the truck approached the exit for downtown Phoenix, Eleanor caught sight of a group of protesters gathered outside the Water Resources Board building. Their signs read, "Water is life," and "Community rights over corporate profits." The growing grassroots movement supporting her cause gave her strength, but also raised the stakes of today's meeting. She also noticed several expensive cars with Horizon Industries parking permits lined up in the building's reserved spaces. The corporation had clearly sent representatives to counter her proposal. Eleanor had expected this Horizon's CEO, Richard Blackwood, had been trying to acquire her family's land for years, first with lowball offers, then with promises of lucrative partnerships, and finally with thinly veiled threats about eminent domain and progress. "We've arrived, Ms. Wilson," Carlos announced, pulling up to the building's main entrance. Eleanor took a deep breath, checking her reflection one last time in the truck's visor mirror. Her mother's words from long ago echoed in her mind. "Eleanor, your wheelchair is not your weakness, it's your perspective. It shows you things others miss from up high." With that thought, she activated the truck's hydraulic lift, ready to add another chapter to her story of defying expectations. The interior of the Arizona Water Resources Board headquarters was a monument to institutional power. Polished marble floors stretched beneath a soaring atrium, while a massive relief map of the state's watershed systems covered one wall. The air carried the subtle scent of air conditioning and expensive cologne, and digital displays showed real-time water levels in the state's major reservoirs, most of them alarmingly low. Eleanor's wheelchair moved quietly across the immaculate floor, her presence creating a subtle ripple of attention in the carefully ordered atmosphere. Behind the curved reception desk, a young man named Jason quickly glanced at her wheelchair before meeting her eyes. "Welcome to the Water Resources Board," he said, his tone professional and respectful. "How may I help you today?" "I'm Eleanor Wilson. I have a 10 a.m. appointment to present to the board regarding the Saguaro Valley aquifer management proposal," she replied, noting with appreciation that he maintained eye contact rather than speaking to Carlos. "Yes, Ms. Wilson. You're expected in boardroom. The board members are completing a prior meeting and should be ready for you in about 15 minutes. May I offer you coffee while you wait?" Eleanor thanked him and declined the coffee, choosing instead to review the room assignments on the digital directory. She noticed that Horizon Industries was scheduled for an 11:30 presentation in the same boardroom immediately following her slot. Their topic was listed as Western Valley Development Project, Water Resource Requirements. Through the glass walls of a nearby conference room, Eleanor could see Richard Blackwood himself speaking with several board members who had stepped out of the main meeting. The CEO of Horizon Industries was in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most small farmers made in a month. His silver hair and confident posture projected the image of success and authority that had helped him build one of the largest development corporations in the Southwest. Blackwood caught sight of Eleanor through the glass and excused himself from his conversation. As he approached, Eleanor noted the calculated warmth in his smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Ms. Wilson," he said, extending his hand. "What a pleasant surprise. I had no idea you were presenting today." Eleanor accepted the handshake, maintaining steady eye contact. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm not surprised to see you here. Horizon seems very interested in water rights these days." "Well, water is the future in the Southwest, as you well know," he replied smoothly. "I've been following your work with the underground river discovery. Quite remarkable. In fact, I've been meaning to reach out to discuss a potential partnership that could benefit us both substantially. I'm always open to discussion, Mr. Blackwood, but my priority remains the sustainable management of the aquifer for the benefit of the entire community, not just select corporate interests." A flash of something annoyance, perhaps, or frustration crossed Blackwood's face before his professional mask returned. Noble sentiments, Ms. Wilson, but pragmatism has its place too. The scale of infrastructure needed to properly utilize that water resource will require significant capital investment, the kind only private enterprise can efficiently mobilize. Before Eleanor could respond, a door opened and board members began filing out of their previous meeting. Among them was Dr. Lydia Washington, the newly appointed board chairperson and a respected hydrologist whom Eleanor had met at several conferences. Dr. Washington approached with a genuine smile. "Eleanor Wilson, I've been looking forward to your presentation. Your aquifer monitoring system has been creating quite a buzz in water management circles." "Thank you, Dr. Washington. I'm eager to share our comprehensive proposal with the full board." Blackwood smoothly inserted himself into the conversation. "Dr. Washington, always a pleasure. I was just telling Ms. Wilson how Horizon Industries might be able to support her admirable conservation efforts through our Western Valley Development Initiative." Dr. Washington's expression remained neutral and professional. "I'm sure we'll have a clearer picture of all options after both presentations today. Speaking of which, we're ready for you now, Ms. Wilson." As Eleanor followed Dr. Washington toward the boardroom, she could feel Blackwood's gaze following her. She had encountered his type before, people who saw the natural world primarily as resources to be exploited, who viewed rural communities as quaint obstacles to progress, and who consistently underestimated her determination. What Blackwood didn't realize was that he had just made the same mistake many others had made before him, assuming that Eleanor Wilson could be easily swayed from her mission. The water beneath her family's land wasn't just a resource to her, it was a responsibility. As she entered the boardroom, Eleanor could see the faces of the 9 board members who would vote on her proposal. Some showed genuine interest, others skepticism, and a few the carefully blank expressions of those who had likely already been approached by Horizon's lobbyists. She had expected this reception and had prepared accordingly. Carlos set up her presentation materials while Eleanor positioned her wheelchair at the head of the room, adjusting it to the optimal height for presenting. The specialized controls allowed her to raise her position slightly, a subtle but important element of command presence she had learned to utilize in professional settings. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for the opportunity to present the Saguaro Valley Aquifer Management Proposal. What I'm about to share isn't just a water conservation plan, it's a vision for the future of our entire region." With that opening, Eleanor launched into a presentation that represented years of research, community input, and practical experience. As satellite imagery and 3D hydrological models appeared on the large display screen, she explained how the underground river system could transform the ecological and economic future of the region if managed with wisdom and foresight. The aquifer doesn't recognize property lines or county boundaries, she explained, showing the extensive reach of the water system. It's a shared resource that requires collaborative management. Our proposal establishes a community water trust that ensures sustainable access for agricultural use, protects the rights of existing communities, maintains ecological balance, and still allows for sensible development. Board member Marcus Chun, whom Eleanor knew had ties to development interests, leaned forward with a skeptical expression. "Ms. Wilson, while your conservation goals are admirable, the infrastructure investment required for your proposed management system is substantial. How do you envision financing this without significant private investment?" It was the opening question Eleanor had anticipated. "Our financing model combines public funding, university research partnerships, and community investment trusts," she replied, bringing up detailed economic projections. "The distributed cost structure ensures no single entity controls the resource, while the long-term economic benefits to the region, which I've outlined on page 32 of your packets, far outweigh the initial investment." Eleanor continued fielding questions with data-driven responses. drawing on both scientific research and practical farming experience. When board member Patricia Gonzalez raised concerns about enforcement of usage limits, Eleanor demonstrated the real-time monitoring system already operational across the cooperative's lands. Water usage accountability is built into the system at every level, she explained. This isn't theoretical. We've been implementing these methods successfully for 3 years. As the presentation continued, Eleanor could see the shift in the room. Even the skeptics were engaged with the data, asking substantive questions rather than dismissive ones. Dr. Washington nodded approvingly at several points, particularly when Eleanor outlined how indigenous water management wisdom had been incorporated into the high-tech monitoring systems. Traditional knowledge and cutting-edge science aren't opposites, Eleanor emphasized. They're complementary approaches that, when combined respectfully, create more resilient systems than either could alone. After 45 minutes of presentation and another 30 of questions, Dr. Washington called the session to a close. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. This is one of the most comprehensive water management proposals this board has reviewed. We'll consider it carefully alongside other development options for the region. As Eleanor gathered her materials, she noticed Richard Blackwood waiting just outside the boardroom, reviewing notes with his team of consultants and lawyers. Their eyes met briefly, and Eleanor recognized the calculating look of a man reassessing an opponent he had previously underestimated. The battle for the future of the underground river and the communities that depended on it was just beginning. But as Eleanor wheeled past the massive watershed map in the lobby, she felt a quiet confidence. Water had shaped the Southwest landscape for millennia, carving canyons through solid rock with patient persistence. Her approach to creating change wasn't so different and just as powerful in the long run. Carlos was waiting with the truck. As Eleanor emerged from the building into the bright midday sun, the group of protesters had grown larger, their chants for water justice echoing across the plaza. "How did it go?" he asked, helping load her presentation materials. Eleanor watched as Blackwood's executive team filed into the building for their presentation. "They listened," she said simply. "Now we need to make sure the whole state does too." As the truck pulled away from the Water Resources Board headquarters, Eleanor was already planning her next steps. The board would take weeks to reach a decision, and she intended to use that time to build an even stronger coalition of support. This wasn't just about one farm or one aquifer anymore. It was about setting a precedent for how communities could reclaim control of their natural resources. Her phone buzzed with messages from Maya and other cooperative members eager for updates. Eleanor smiled, thinking of how far they had come from the days when her family farm was on the brink of failure. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but as the truck passed the Welcome to Phoenix sign on their way out of the city, Eleanor felt the same determination that had carried her through 15 years of challenges. What she didn't know yet was that Richard Blackwood wasn't accustomed to obstacles he couldn't remove, and that he was already setting in motion plans that would test her resilience like never before. The underground river had remained hidden. For centuries, its power untapped. The struggle to determine its future would reveal equally hidden strengths in Eleanor Wilson and the community she had built. The morning after her presentation to the Water Resources Board, Eleanor woke before dawn, as was her habit since childhood. The first pale light filtered through her bedroom window, illuminating the collection of geological maps and water flow diagrams pinned to her walls. She transferred smoothly from bed to wheelchair with the practiced motion of someone who had long ago integrated such movements into the rhythm of daily life. Her phone was already blinking with notifications, messages of support from cooperative members who had watched the live stream of her presentation, news alerts about water rights in the Southwest, and an email from Dr. Washington requesting additional data on projected aquifer recharge rates. But it was a text from Maya that caught her attention first. "Turn on Channel 8 News, now." Eleanor quickly switched on the small television in her kitchen, as she prepared her morning tea. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking news in the ongoing water crisis. Controversial documents leaked overnight appear to show that Development Corporation, Horizon Industries, has been purchasing water rights throughout Saguaro County through shell companies, potentially circumventing state regulations limiting corporate water ownership. The screen showed aerial footage of Eleanor's cooperative, identifying it as the epicenter of a newly discovered underground river system that could transform water access across 3 counties. The reporter continued, sources claim Horizon Industries plans to dam portions of the aquifer for exclusive use in luxury housing developments, redirecting water flow away from existing agricultural communities. Eleanor's hands stilled on her teacup. This wasn't just about her land anymore. Blackwood was orchestrating a much larger water grab than anyone had suspected. Before she could process the implications, her phone rang. Maya's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Eleanor, there's something else you need to know. Survey crews from the county assessor's office are at the north boundary. They're with someone from Horizon, claiming there's a property line dispute." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Eleanor replied, already moving toward the door. The morning sun had barely cleared the eastern mountains as Eleanor's truck approached the northern boundary of the cooperative. She could see a cluster of vehicles with official county markings, alongside a black SUV with Horizon's corporate logo emblazoned on its side. Carlos accelerated slightly, his usually calm demeanor tightened with concern. "This is happening faster than we expected," he said quietly. "Blackwood must have been planning this move for months." Eleanor nodded, her mind racing through potential strategies. "They're trying to overwhelm us with multiple fronts of attack. Classic corporate tactic. They have the resources to fight on several battlefields at once, while we have to choose our battles carefully." As they pulled up to the gathering, Eleanor recognized Jessica Reeves, Horizon's lead attorney, standing beside 2 county officials. The woman's crisp pantsuit and perfect composure contrasted sharply with the dusty surroundings of the farm boundary. Eleanor directed Carlos to stop the truck where her wheelchair ramp would deploy directly onto solid ground rather than loose soil, a small tactical decision that ensured she would enter the confrontation from a position of physical stability. As the hydraulic lift lowered her to ground level, she noticed several cooperative members had already gathered, standing protectively near the property markers that had defined the farm's boundaries for generations. "Ms. Wilson," Jessica Reeves called out, approaching with a tablet in hand, "we're conducting a routine survey verification. Nothing to be concerned about." Eleanor wheeled forward, positioning herself between the corporate attorney and her. "Land. There's nothing routine about bringing corporate representatives to a county survey. Ms. Reeves, those boundaries have been clearly established for over 60 years. Jessica smiled thinly. "That's precisely the issue. Our research indicates a discrepancy in the original survey from 1962. Modern GPS measurements suggest the boundary actually runs approximately 75 feet south of the current markers directly. Through your northern monitoring station." One of the county officials, a younger man who kept glancing nervously between Eleanor and the corporate attorney, stepped forward with his own tablet. "We're just here to take measurements, ma'am. Standard procedure when a potential discrepancy is reported." Eleanor maintained a calm exterior, though her mind was calculating rapidly. The northern monitoring station was one of the most critical. In their aquifer management system, positioned at a crucial junction point in the underground river's flow. Losing control of it would compromise their entire water monitoring network. "I'll need to see the documentation for the supposed discrepancy," Eleanor said firmly. "And I'll have our legal team present before any measurements are taken. Those stations are proprietary technology protected by both patents and agricultural security regulations." Jessica's professional smile didn't waver. "Of course, we anticipated your concern." She handed Eleanor a thick envelope. "Here's the court order authorizing today's survey. along with the historical documentation indicating the boundary issue. The judge was quite clear that the survey could proceed immediately. Eleanor quickly scanned the documents, recognizing Judge Harrison's signature. The judge was known for his pro-development positions and connections to several board members of Phoenix-based corporations, including Horizon Industries. "You've been busy, Ms. Reeves," Eleanor observed, keeping her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. The documents appeared legally sound, even if the motivations behind them were suspect. Horizon Industries is simply exercising due diligence and understanding property boundaries before pursuing further regional development. Jessica replied smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood sends his regards, by the way. He was quite impressed with your presentation yesterday." The implied connection between her Water Resources Board presentation and this sudden boundary dispute was clear. This was Blackwood's first countermove, a warning shot demonstrating his influence and resources. Eleanor felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Glancing down, she saw a message from their cooperative's attorney. "Don't stop the survey. Document everything. We'll file injunction by noon." Samuel Thompson had been their legal counsel since the cooperative's formation, and Eleanor trusted his judgment implicitly. Looking back at Jessica, Eleanor nodded slowly. "Proceed with your survey, Ms. Reeves, but our representatives will record every measurement, and we reserve all rights to challenge any findings." She turned to Maya, who had arrived during the conversation. "Get the drone up. I want aerial documentation of the entire process." Then, addressing the cooperative members who had gathered, "Return to your regular duties. But Raj and Lucia, please stay to observe the survey team." Eleanor's calm, organized response clearly wasn't what Jessica had expected. The attorney's composed expression flickered briefly with something like surprise before she nodded to the county surveyors to begin their work. As the teams moved toward the northern boundary markers, Carlos leaned close to Eleanor. "They wanted a scene," he said quietly, "something they could use to paint us as obstructionist." "Exactly," Eleanor replied. "Blackwood is too smart for outright intimidation. He's building a legal narrative to justify whatever comes next." She watched the surveyors setting up their equipment with methodical precision. This boundary dispute isn't the real fight, it's just the opening move. By mid-morning news, vans had begun appearing at the cooperative's main entrance. The leaked documents about Horizon's water rights purchases had created a media storm, and Eleanor's confrontation with the boundary survey team had somehow reached local journalists. Despite happening in one of the most remote areas of the property, "They're calling for you to make a statement," Maya said, returning from turning away the third reporter of the day. "Channel 12 is doing a special report on water rights tonight and wants you as their main interview." Eleanor was in the cooperative's data center, reviewing real-time measurements from the aquifer monitoring system. The underground river's flows remained steady, but she had noticed subtle pressure changes near the section where Horizon had recently purchased neighboring land. "Tell them I'll provide a statement tomorrow," she replied, not looking up from the monitors. "Right now, we need to focus on protecting the monitoring network. If Blackwood's planning what I think he is, we don't have much time." Maya hesitated. "Eleanor, maybe we should take this media opportunity. Public support could be our strongest defense." Eleanor turned her wheelchair away from the monitors, giving Maya her full attention. "You're right. But we need to be strategic about it." She gestured toward the complex data visualizations on the screens. "Most people won't understand these technical details. We need to translate this into something everyone can grasp immediately." She pulled up a different set of maps on her tablet. "Here's what we're going to do. Call Professor Diaz at the university. We need to fast-track the 3D visualization model of the aquifer system. And contact those documentary filmmakers who visited last month, the ones doing the series on climate adaptation." Maya's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to make the invisible visible." "Exactly," Eleanor nodded. Blackwood is counting on this being too complex for the public to engage with. Most people have never seen an underground river. They can't visualize what's at stake. We're going to change that. As Maya left to make the calls, Eleanor returned to the monitoring data. The subtle pressure changes bothered her. According to their hydrogeological surveys, that section of the aquifer had a natural narrowing, a bottleneck where the underground river passed through a dense layer of bedrock before spreading out beneath the cooperative's lands. If someone wanted to control the water flow to the entire valley, that bottleneck would be the perfect place to do it. Her phone rang again. Samuel Thompson, their attorney. Eleanor, I've filed for an emergency injunction on the boundary survey, but there's something else you need to know. Horizon just submitted applications for deep drilling permits on their newly acquired properties. They're claiming it's for geological research, but the specifications match water extraction equipment. Eleanor's suspicions were confirmed. They're positioning to control the bottleneck, she said. How quickly can they start drilling? That's the problem, Samuel replied. They've somehow fast-tracked the permits. County records show provisional approval already granted. They could begin as early as next week. After ending the call, Eleanor sat motionless for a moment, absorbing the implications. Horizon was moving with unexpected speed and coordination. Blackwood must have been planning this for months, perhaps years, quietly acquiring properties, influencing officials, preparing legal strategies. She had underestimated him, and that mistake could cost the entire region its water security. Eleanor wheeled quickly toward the cooperative's main office, her mind shifting from defense to counterattack. As she entered the building, she nearly collided with her father, who was rushing in from the fields. Eleanor, Jack Wilson said, his weathered face tight with concern. There are rumors spreading through town that we're selling water rights to Horizon. Some of our community supporters are confused, asking if we've made a deal behind their backs. Disinformation, Eleanor replied grimly. Another front in Blackwood's campaign. He's trying to isolate us from our supporters. She reached for her father's hand. Dad, I need you to go into town. Talk to people face to face. You've known these families for generations. They'll believe you over some corporate press release. Jack nodded, his expression determined. At 68, he remained a respected figure in the community, his integrity unquestioned even by those who had initially doubted his daughter's ambitious plans for the farm. He's countering science with spectacle, Eleanor observed, her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. And that aquifer recharge technology is experimental at best, dangerous at worst. We need to respond, but carefully. If we dismiss it outright, we'll look like Luddites opposed to innovation. Samuel Thompson called within minutes of Blackwood's announcement. Eleanor, they've just filed for expedited approval of their complete development plan. They're trying to force the Water Resources Board to make a decision before your scientific evidence can be properly reviewed. How soon? Eleanor asked, her mind already calculating timelines. They're requesting an emergency session next week, citing urgent economic development priorities and something about federal funding deadlines. Eleanor thanked him and turned to her team. Blackwood's playing hardball. He knows our scientific model is compelling, so he's trying to overwhelm it with promises of jobs and economic growth. We need to shift strategies. She wheeled to the large map on the wall, tracing the underground river's path with her finger. We've been fighting this as a water conservation issue, but we need to make it personal, show the human impact, not just the ecological one. Maya nodded in understanding. Put faces to the data. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed. Contact every family that would be affected by Horizon's water diversion. Farmers, ranchers, tribal communities, small business owners. We need their stories, and we need them ready to speak at that emergency session. As the team dispersed to implement the new strategy, Eleanor found herself alone in the conference room. studying the maps and data that had become the battlefield for the region's future. The technical aspects of this fight she understood completely. The science was on their side. But Blackwood had just demonstrated his mastery of a different kind of persuasion, appealing to dreams and fears rather than facts and evidence. Eleanor was still deep in thought when her father appeared at the door, his weathered face tight with concern. "I just heard about Blackwood's announcement. That Aquatech outfit, they're the ones who tried that failed desalination project in California, aren't they?" Eleanor nodded. "The same. 3 counties invested millions in their technology, and it never produced even half the promised water output. But by then, the developers had already built and sold the homes that depended on that water supply." Jack Wilson moved to stand beside his daughter, looking at the map. "Your mother would be proud of you, Eleanor. She always said you had the Wilson's stubbornness and twice the brains of anyone else in the family." Eleanor smiled at the mention of her mother, who had passed away 2 years before the accident. Helen Wilson had been the one who taught Eleanor that the land wasn't just something you owned. It was something you belonged to, something you held in trust for future generations. "I'm not sure stubbornness is enough this time, Dad," Eleanor admitted. "Blackwood has resources we can't match, and he's promising people things they desperately want to believe: jobs, prosperity, technological solutions to problems that seem overwhelming." Jack rested his hand on her shoulder. "Maybe, but you have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "The truth," Jack said simply. "And people who know you'll stand by it, no matter what." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor divided her time between working with university researchers to analyze Aquatech's claims, coordinating with affected communities throughout the valley, and preparing for the Emergency Water Resources Board session. Sleep became a luxury, as the stakes of the conflict became increasingly clear. On the morning of the 3rd day, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor at the cooperative. Dr. Washington's official car pulled up outside the community center, and the Water Resources Board chairperson requested a private meeting. "This is highly irregular, Ms. Wilson," Dr. Washington said once they were alone in Eleanor's office. "I shouldn't be here, but certain aspects of this situation have become concerning to me professionally." Eleanor waited, sensing that Dr. Washington had taken a significant risk by coming. "Aquatech's technology," the chairperson continued, choosing her words carefully. "The data they've submitted to the board appears to have certain inconsistencies. Nothing definitive enough for me to formally reject their application, but enough to raise questions." "We found similar concerns," Eleanor acknowledged. "Their recharge claims violate basic principles of hydrogeology in this type of aquifer system." Dr. Washington nodded slightly. "The emergency session is being pushed by 2 board members with close ties to development interests. I can delay but not prevent it. You'll have 20 minutes to present your case. 20 minutes to counter a multi-billion-dollar development plan backed by a multinational corporation," Eleanor said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "I know it's not fair," Dr. Washington replied, "but I thought you should know what you're facing." She rose to leave, then hesitated. "Off the record, Ms. Wilson. This is the most blatant example of regulatory capture I've seen in 20 years of public service. Whatever you present, make it impossible for them to ignore." After Dr. Washington departed, Eleanor called an emergency strategy session. The cooperative's conference room quickly filled with core team members, scientific advisors, and community representatives. 20 minutes, Eleanor announced without preamble. "That's what we have to counter Blackwood's entire presentation and Aquatech's pseudoscience." Discouraged murmurs filled the room until Maya spoke up. "Then we don't try to counter everything. We focus on one undeniable truth they can't refute, something so clear that even board members looking for reasons to approve Horizon's plan can't ignore it." Eleanor considered this approach. "The bottleneck," she said finally. "If we can Prove beyond any doubt that disrupting water flow at that specific point would have catastrophic and irreversible consequences. It might be enough. Professor Diaz nodded thoughtfully. We'd need to demonstrate not just theoretical risk, but empirical evidence of connectivity between that section of the aquifer and broader water systems. The springs, Carlos suggested suddenly. The desert springs on tribal lands to the east. Our monitoring data shows direct pressure relationships between the bottleneck and those springs. If one is disrupted, the other fails. Eleanor's mind raced with the implications. The desert springs on Tohono O'odham tribal lands were not just ecologically important, they were culturally sacred sites protected by federal law and treaty rights. If they could definitively prove that Horizon's drilling would affect those springs, it would trigger tribal consultation requirements that even the most development-friendly board members couldn't circumvent. That's it, Eleanor agreed. But we need absolutely ironclad evidence of the connection, the kind that would stand up in federal court. The team worked through the night, analyzing years of monitoring data and conducting additional tests at key points in the aquifer system. By dawn, they had compiled compelling evidence showing the direct relationship between water pressure at Horizon's drilling sites and the flow rates at the sacred springs. Eleanor had just finished reviewing the final report when her phone rang. It was Samuel, their attorney, his voice tense. Eleanor, Horizon just filed for a temporary restraining order against you and the cooperative. They're claiming your monitoring systems are illegally collecting data from beneath their properties, and that your 3D model contains proprietary geological information they own. That's absurd, Eleanor replied. You can't own information about a natural resource, and our monitoring is all done from our own land. I know, Samuel agreed, but the judge who got the case is the same one who fast-tracked their boundary dispute. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, the same time as the Water Resources Board emergency session. Eleanor understood immediately. They're trying to prevent me from attending the board meeting. If I'm in court defending against their restraining order, I can't be presenting our evidence to the board. Exactly, Samuel confirmed. Classic divide and conquer. After ending the call, Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment, weighing options. Blackwood had outmaneuvered her again, forcing her to choose between defending the cooperative against immediate legal attack or fighting for the long-term protection of the entire aquifer. Carlos found her still deep in thought an hour later. The team is waiting for direction, he said gently. What's the plan? Eleanor looked up, determination replacing the momentary doubt in her eyes. We divide our forces. I'll attend the court hearing as the cooperative's founder. My absence would be noticed and might even be held against us. You, Maya, and Professor Diaz will present our evidence to the Water Resources Board. But you know the data better than anyone, Carlos objected. You've been preparing for this presentation for weeks. And I've trained all of you to understand it just as well, Eleanor countered. Besides, we have a secret weapon they don't know about. That afternoon, Eleanor convened what she called their Resistance Council in the cooperative's community kitchen, the heart of their operation where members gathered for meals and celebrations. He's countering science with spectacle, Eleanor observed, her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. And that aquifer recharge technology is experimental at best, dangerous at worst. We need to respond, but carefully. If we dismiss it outright, we'll look like Luddites opposed to innovation. Samuel Thompson called within minutes of Blackwood's announcement. Eleanor, they've just filed for expedited approval of their complete development plan. They're trying to force the Water Resources Board to make a decision before your scientific evidence can be properly reviewed. How soon? Eleanor asked, her mind already calculating timelines. They're requesting an emergency session next week, citing urgent economic development priorities and something about federal funding deadlines. Eleanor thanked him and turned to her team. Blackwood's playing hardball. He knows our scientific model is compelling, so he's trying to overwhelm it with promises of jobs and economic growth. We need to shift strategies." She wheeled to the large map on the wall, tracing the underground river's path with her finger. "We've been fighting this as a water conservation issue, but we need to make it personal, show the human impact, not just the ecological one." Maya nodded in understanding. "Put faces to the data." "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "Contact every family that would be affected by Horizon's water diversion. Farmers, ranchers, tribal communities, small business owners. We need their stories, and we need them ready to speak at that emergency session." As the team dispersed to implement the new strategy, Eleanor found herself alone in the conference room, studying the maps and data that had become the battlefield for the region's future. The technical aspects of this fight she understood completely. The science was on their side. But Blackwood had just demonstrated his mastery of a different kind of persuasion, appealing to dreams and fears rather than facts and evidence. Eleanor was still deep in thought when her father appeared at the door, his weathered face tight with concern. "I just heard about Blackwood's announcement. That Aquatech outfit, they're the ones who tried that failed desalination project in California, aren't they?" Eleanor nodded. "The same. 3 counties invested millions in their technology, and it never produced even half the promised water output. But by then, the developers had already built and sold the homes that depended on that water supply." Jack Wilson moved to stand beside his daughter, looking at the map. "Your mother would be proud of you, Eleanor. She always said you had the Wilson's stubbornness and twice the brains of anyone else in the family." Eleanor smiled at the mention of her mother, who had passed away 2 years before the accident. Helen Wilson had been the one who taught Eleanor that the land wasn't just something you owned, it was something you belonged to, something you held in trust for future generations. "I'm not sure stubbornness is enough this time, Dad," Eleanor admitted. "Blackwood has resources we can't match, and he's promising people things they desperately want to believe: jobs, prosperity, technological solutions to problems that seem overwhelming." Jack rested his hand on her shoulder. "Maybe, but you have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "The truth," Jack said simply. "And people who know you'll stand by it, no matter what." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor divided her time between working with university researchers to analyze Aquatech's claims, coordinating with affected communities throughout the valley, and preparing for the Emergency Water Resources Board session. Sleep became a luxury as the stakes of the conflict became increasingly clear. On the morning of the 3rd day, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor at the cooperative. Dr. Washington's official car pulled up outside the community center, and the Water Resources Board chairperson requested a private meeting. "This is highly irregular, Ms. Wilson," Dr. Washington said once they were alone in Eleanor's office. "I shouldn't be here, but certain aspects of this situation have become concerning to me professionally." Eleanor waited, sensing that Dr. Washington had taken a significant risk by coming. "Aquatech's technology," the chairperson continued, choosing her words carefully. "The data they've submitted to the board appears to have certain inconsistencies. Nothing definitive enough for me to formally reject their application, but enough to raise questions." "We've found similar concerns," Eleanor acknowledged. "Their recharge claims violate basic principles of hydrogeology in this type of aquifer system." Dr. Washington nodded slightly. "The emergency session is being pushed by 2 board members with close ties to development interests. I can delay but not prevent it. You'll have 20 minutes to present your case. 20 minutes to counter a multi-billion-dollar development plan backed by a multinational corporation," Eleanor said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "I know it's not fair," Dr. Washington replied, "but I thought you should know what you're facing." She rose to leave, then hesitated. "Off the record, Ms. Wilson, This is the most blatant example of regulatory capture I've seen in 20 years of public service. Whatever you present, make it impossible for them to ignore. After Dr. Washington departed, Eleanor called an emergency strategy session. The cooperative's conference room quickly filled with core team members, scientific advisors, and community representatives. 20 minutes, Eleanor announced without preamble. That's what we have to counter Blackwood's entire presentation and Aquatech's pseudoscience. Discouraged murmurs filled the room until Maya spoke up. Then we don't try to counter everything. We focus on one undeniable truth they can't refute. Something so clear that even board members looking for reasons to approve Horizon's plan can't ignore it. Eleanor considered this approach. The bottleneck, she said finally. If we can prove beyond any doubt that disrupting water flow at that specific point would have catastrophic and irreversible consequences, it might be enough. Professor Diaz nodded thoughtfully. We'd need to demonstrate not just theoretical risk, but empirical evidence of connectivity between that section of the aquifer and broader water systems. The springs, Carlos suggested suddenly. The desert springs on tribal lands to the east. Our monitoring data shows direct pressure relationships between the bottleneck and those springs. If one is disrupted, the other fails. Eleanor's mind raced with the implications. The desert springs on Tohono O'odham tribal lands were not just ecologically important, they were culturally sacred sites protected by federal law and treaty rights. If they could definitively prove that Horizon's drilling would affect those springs, it would trigger tribal consultation requirements that even the most development-friendly board members couldn't circumvent. That's it, Eleanor agreed. But we need absolutely ironclad evidence of the connection, the kind that would stand up in federal court. The team worked through the night, analyzing years of monitoring data and conducting additional tests at key points in the aquifer system. By dawn, they had compiled compelling evidence showing the direct relationship between water pressure at Horizon's drilling sites and the flow rates at the sacred springs. Eleanor had just finished reviewing the final report when her phone rang. It was Samuel, their attorney, his voice tense. Eleanor, Horizon just filed for a temporary restraining order against you and the cooperative. They're claiming your monitoring systems are illegally collecting data from beneath their properties, and that your 3D model contains proprietary geological information they own. That's absurd, Eleanor replied. You can't own information about a natural resource, and our monitoring is all done from our own land. I know, Samuel agreed, but the judge who got the case is the same one who fast-tracked their boundary dispute. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, the same time as the Water Resources Board emergency session. Eleanor understood immediately. They're trying to prevent me from attending the board meeting. If I'm in court defending against their restraining order, I can't be presenting our evidence to the board. Exactly, Samuel confirmed. Classic divide and conquer. After ending the call, Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment, weighing options. Blackwood had outmaneuvered her again, forcing her to choose between defending the cooperative against immediate legal attack or fighting for the long-term protection of the entire aquifer. Carlos found her still deep in thought an hour later. The team is waiting for direction, he said gently. What's the plan? Eleanor looked up, determination replacing the momentary doubt in her eyes. We divide our forces. I'll attend the court hearing as the cooperative's founder. My absence would be noticed and might even be held against us. You, Maya, and Professor Diaz will present our evidence to the Water Resources Board. But you know the data better than anyone, Carlos objected. You've been preparing for this presentation for weeks. And I've trained all of you to understand it just as well, Eleanor countered. Besides, we have a secret weapon they don't know about. That afternoon, Eleanor convened what she called their Resistance Council in the cooperative's community kitchen, the heart of their operation where members gathered for meals and celebrations. The room filled with farmers, tribal representatives, local business owners, and families who had lived in the valley for generations. Horizon Industries is trying to divide us, Eleanor began, addressing the assembled group. They're using their money and influence to create the illusion that this is a simple choice between economic development and environmental preservation. But everyone in this room knows it's really about something more fundamental, whether the water that sustains all life in this valley should be controlled by those who live here and depend on it, or by those who see it only as a commodity to be exploited for profit. She outlined the two-pronged strategy defending against the restraining order, while simultaneously presenting their scientific evidence to the Water Resources Board. But there's a third element that Blackwood can't anticipate or control, she continued. And that's you, the people whose lives and livelihoods depend on this water. Eleanor's plan was both simple and powerful. While the legal and scientific battles proceeded in formal settings, the community would stage a water witness event, with hundreds of residents forming a human chain along the path of the underground river, making visible what Horizon wanted to keep invisible, the connection between the water and the people who depended on it. They want to make this about papers and permits, Eleanor concluded. We need to make it about people and their right to determine the future of their own communities. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect Arizona day that belied the storm gathering in courtrooms and boardrooms. Eleanor dressed with particular care, selecting professional attire that acknowledged the seriousness of the court, proceeding while remaining practical for her wheelchair. As Carlos helped load her specialized lift into the truck, they could already see vehicles converging on the cooperative from all directions, community members arriving for the water witness event. Remember, Eleanor instructed Maya as they prepared to part ways, the Sacred Springs connection is our strongest argument. Even if the board is inclined to favor development, they can't legally approve a plan that would impact tribal water rights without proper consultation. Maya nodded, clutching the folder containing their carefully prepared evidence. And if they try to rush a decision? Then Professor Diaz formally enters our complete data set into the public record, Eleanor replied. That triggers scientific review requirements that can't be circumvented, even in an emergency session. As Eleanor's truck pulled away toward the courthouse, she caught glimpses of people gathering along roadsides throughout the valley, farmers, teachers, store owners, children, elders, all wearing blue to symbolize the water that connected them. The community was making itself visible in a way that no board meeting or court proceeding could ignore. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Eleanor arrived. Horizon's legal team was already present, a phalanx of dark suits and briefcases that practically screamed corporate power. Leading them was Jessica Reeves, who had orchestrated the boundary dispute confrontation. Eleanor navigated her wheelchair through the crowd with quiet dignity, acknowledging supporters with nods, but saving her words for the courtroom. As she passed the Horizon team, she noticed Richard Blackwood himself standing slightly apart, watching her with an expression that mingled respect with determination. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Eleanor realized something important about her opponent. Blackwood wasn't evil in any simple sense. He truly believed in his vision of progress and development. The tragedy was that his vision was so narrow, so disconnected from the land and the people who belonged to it. Inside the courtroom, Eleanor positioned her wheelchair beside Samuel at the defendant's table. Judge Harrison entered, his expression inscrutable as he surveyed the crowded room. Your Honor, Jessica Reeves began, rising to present Horizon's case. We seek immediate relief from the Wilson Cooperative's illegal data collection activities. Their monitoring systems are effectively conducting corporate espionage, gathering proprietary geological information from beneath Horizon's legally acquired properties. Eleanor listened calmly as Reeves outlined an argument that twisted water, law, property rights, and technology regulations into a pretzel of legal sophistry. When it was Samuel's turn to respond, he did so with methodical precision, dismantling Horizon's claims point by point. "Your Honor," Samuel concluded, "water doesn't recognize property lines, and information about a shared natural resource cannot be proprietary. The Wilson Cooperative's monitoring systems observe water movement from their own land, just as anyone might observe clouds moving overhead without trespassing on neighboring property." Judge Harrison's questions revealed his skepticism toward Samuel's arguments, despite their legal soundness. Eleanor had expected this. The judge's connections to development interests were well known. But the purpose of their defense wasn't necessarily to win this particular skirmish. It was to establish a record for the appeals that would inevitably follow. As the morning proceeded, Eleanor checked her phone whenever possible for updates from the Water Resources Board meeting. Maya's texts were terse but encouraging. Evidence presented. Strong reaction to Spring's data. Tribal representatives speaking. Now, then shortly before noon, something unexpected happened. Judge Harrison received a note from his clerk, read it with a frown, and called for a 30-minute recess. As the courtroom emptied, Samuel's phone rang. "It's Maya," he said, handing the phone to Eleanor. "You need to turn on the news," Maya said without preamble. "Something's happening at the Horizon drilling site." Eleanor wheeled quickly to the courthouse lobby, where a television was tuned to a local news channel. The screen showed dramatic aerial footage of one of Horizon's properties, where heavy equipment had apparently begun preliminary work, despite not having final approval. But what had drawn the news helicopter was something else entirely, a massive sinkhole that had suddenly opened beneath one of the drilling rigs, partially swallowing it and sending workers scrambling for safety. The reporter's voice was excited. Geologists on scene suggest the sinkhole may have exposed part of the underground river system that's been at the center of the water rights controversy. Horizon Industries crews were reportedly drilling a test bore when they encountered what company spokesmen described as unexpected subsurface conditions. The camera zoomed in on the sinkhole, where water could clearly be seen flowing through a newly exposed cavern system. Eleanor recognized the location immediately. It was directly above one of the most vulnerable sections of the aquifer, a place where their monitoring had detected unusual pressure changes in recent days. "They started drilling early," she whispered, "without proper geological surveys." Samuel was already on his phone, calling contacts at the State Environmental Protection Agency. "This changes everything," he said to Eleanor. "They've potentially violated at least 3 different permits, and if that water is contaminated by drilling fluids..." Before he could finish, Eleanor's phone rang Dr. Washington, calling from the Water Resources Board emergency session. "Ms. Wilson," the chairperson said, her professional tone barely concealing her anger, "the board is suspending consideration of all pending applications related to the Saguaro Valley aquifer system in light of the incident at Horizon site. Furthermore, we're implementing an immediate moratorium on any drilling within the mapped boundaries of the underground river, pending a comprehensive environmental impact review." Eleanor thanked her and ended the call, turning to Samuel with a mixture of relief and concern. "They've suspended the process. The aquifer is temporarily protected, but..." Samuel prompted, sensing her reservation. "But that sinkhole could be just the beginning," Eleanor replied. "If Horizon's unauthorized drilling damaged the cavern structure, we could be looking at broader subsidence issues, potential contamination, altered flow patterns." She was interrupted by a commotion at the courthouse entrance. Richard Blackwood had arrived, surrounded by advisors and looking significantly less composed than usual. Catching sight of Eleanor, he broke away from his entourage and approached her directly. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said without preamble, his voice low and intense. "That preliminary work was just site preparation, not actual drilling. Someone exceeded their authority." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Whether it was authorized or not, Mr. Blackwood, it happened. And it demonstrates exactly what we've been warning about. The aquifer system is more vulnerable and complex than your plans acknowledged. For the first time since she'd met him, Blackwood seemed at a loss. The board has suspended our application, and the environmental agencies are already on site. This setback will cost millions. It could have cost lives, Eleanor countered. Water has power, Mr. Blackwood, power you tried to control without truly understanding it. Before he could respond, Judge Harrison re-entered the courtroom, calling the proceedings back to order. To everyone's surprise, he immediately addressed the situation. In light of the environmental emergency unfolding at the Horizon Industries property, this court is postponing ruling on the temporary restraining order. Both parties are directed to focus their immediate attention on mitigating potential damage to the aquifer system. With that, he adjourned the hearing. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor found herself surrounded by reporters seeking comment on the dramatic developments. With cameras rolling, she spoke not about victory or vindication, but about responsibility and cooperation. What happened today demonstrates why water management requires humility, scientific rigor, and community involvement, she said. The Wilson Cooperative stands ready to assist with emergency monitoring and mitigation efforts. Our primary concern now is protecting the water resource that all of us, including Horizon Industries, depend on. As the media dispersed, Eleanor received another call, this time from her father. "You need to see this," Jack Wilson said, his voice filled with wonder. "The whole valley has turned out. It's like nothing I've ever seen." Eleanor's truck took a different route back to the cooperative, following roads that traced the path of the underground river. What she saw through the windows left her speechless. Thousands of people lined the roads and fields, forming a human chain that stretched for miles across the valley, all wearing blue, all standing together to make visible their connection to the water beneath their feet. News helicopters captured the scene from above, a blue ribbon of humanity tracing the invisible river, converging on the cooperative headquarters where Maya and the team had established an emergency response center to monitor the sinkhole situation. As Eleanor's truck approached the cooperative, the gathered community members began to applaud. It wasn't celebration of a victory, the battle for the aquifer's future was far from over, but recognition of a turning point. For the first time, the invisible connections between water, land, and community had been made visible for all to see. Eleanor wheeled through the parting crowd toward the monitoring center, where her expertise would be needed to help assess and address the sinkhole's impact. The day's events had created an unexpected opportunity. Crisis had made collaboration necessary, even between adversaries. As she entered the building, Eleanor caught sight of Richard Blackwood's car pulling into the cooperative's parking area. He had come not as an opponent, but as a stakeholder in the emergency response. The true test now would be whether this crisis could transform conflict into cooperation, whether the underground river could become a source of connection rather than division. The battle wasn't over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. And as Eleanor prepared to face this new challenge, she realized that sometimes the most powerful advocacy isn't about winning fights. It's about revealing truths that can no longer be denied once they've been seen. 6 months after the sinkhole incident, Eleanor Wilson sat in her customized wheelchair on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking the transformed landscape of Saguaro Valley. The morning sun cast long shadows across what had once been a crisis site, but was now something remarkable, a living laboratory for sustainable water management that attracted scientists, policymakers, and community leaders from around the world. The massive sinkhole that had swallowed Horizon's drilling equipment had been stabilized and converted into the Saguaro Valley Aquifer Research Center, a glass-domed structure that allowed visitors to see the underground river with their own eyes for the first time. Educational exhibits explained the complex hydrogeology of the region, while real-time monitoring displays showed water flows, quality metrics, and usage patterns across the connected communities. "Ms. Wilson," called a voice behind her. "The governor's motorcade just passed the main entrance. They'll be here in 5 minutes." Eleanor nodded to Lucia, who had grown from community outreach coordinator to deputy director of the new Saguaro Valley Water Trust in the months since the crisis. "Is everyone in position?" "Already," Lucia confirmed. "Community representatives, tribal leaders, university partners, and yes, even Mr. Blackwood arrived early. He's waiting with the others at the signing pavilion." Eleanor smiled slightly at the mention of Richard Blackwood. Their relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since that dramatic day when his company's actions had inadvertently exposed the fragility and importance of the underground river system. What had begun as a confrontation between adversaries had transformed through crisis necessity and eventually mutual respect into something neither of them could have anticipated. "It's still hard to believe we're here," Lucia added, gazing out at the research center. "6 months ago, we thought we were going to lose everything." "Crisis reveals truth," Eleanor replied, adjusting her position to face the young woman who had become one of her most trusted colleagues. "And sometimes the truth is powerful enough to change even the most entrenched positions." The truth revealed by the sinkhole had indeed been impossible to ignore. The dramatic collapse had exposed not just the physical reality of the underground river, but also the inadequacy of existing water management frameworks. With drilling equipment dangling precariously over a newly exposed section of the aquifer, potential contamination threatening water supplies for thousands, and national media coverage highlighting the conflict, even the most development-friendly, officials had been forced to acknowledge that a new approach was needed. What had followed was remarkable, an emergency summit convened by the governor, bringing together all stakeholders in an intensive effort to address both the immediate crisis and the underlying policy failures that had created it. Eleanor's cooperative had provided crucial data and expertise, while Horizon Industries contributed emergency resources and engineering capabilities. Indigenous knowledge from tribal water experts was integrated with cutting-edge science from university researchers. Out of crisis had emerged collaboration, and from collaboration, innovation. The sound of vehicles approaching drew Eleanor back to the present moment. She wheeled herself toward the ceremonial pavilion where today's historic signing would take place. The path, like all walkways in the new research center, was designed with accessibility as a core principle rather than an afterthought, gently sloped and surfaced with materials that made wheelchair navigation effortless. As she approached the pavilion, Eleanor could see the gathered dignitaries, the governor and key state officials, tribal leaders in traditional dress, university presidents, community representatives, and corporate partners. Among them stood Richard Blackwood, no longer the adversary, but now a key ally in the unprecedented coalition that had formed around a new vision for water management. The governor spotted Eleanor and stepped forward to greet her. "Ms. Wilson, today wouldn't be possible without your persistence and vision. You've transformed how we think about water in this state." Eleanor accepted the compliment with a gracious nod. "Change happens when it must, Governor." The crisis simply made visible what was already true, that water connects us all, and managing it requires all of us working together. As the ceremony began, Eleanor took her place on the stage alongside the other key signatories of the Saguaro Valley Water Compact. The document they would sign today represented a revolutionary approach to water governance, establishing the nation's first bioregional water trust, a public-private partnership that would manage the underground river system not according to property lines or political boundaries, but according to the natural contours of the watershed itself. The governor approached the podium to address the gathered crowd and media. Today marks a new chapter in the story of water in the American Southwest. For too long, we've managed this precious resource through fragmented systems that pit communities. against each other and prioritize short-term gain over long-term sustainability. The Saguaro Valley Water Compact changes that paradigm. Eleanor listened as the governor outlined the key provisions of the agreement: the creation of a democratically governed water trust with representation from all stakeholder groups, implementation of advanced monitoring systems based on Eleanor's cooperative model, integration of indigenous water management practices, sustainable allocation formulas that protected both human needs and ecological health, and innovative financing mechanisms that valued water conservation as highly as water consumption. This approach wasn't born in a conference room or dreamed up by consultants, the governor continued. It emerged from crisis, from necessity, and from the remarkable leadership of individuals who refused to accept that conflict over water was inevitable. The governor gestured toward Eleanor and the other signatories. In particular, I want to acknowledge Eleanor Wilson, whose vision for her family farm grew into a model that is now transforming water management across our state. When a devastating accident left her paralyzed at 17, many thought her dreams had ended. Instead, she turned challenge into opportunity, developing innovations that will benefit generations to come. As applause rippled through the audience, Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. The journey from that hospital bed 15 years ago to this moment had been filled with obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. Yet each challenge had forced her to think differently, to seek solutions where others saw only problems. The governor invited each signatory to speak briefly before the formal signing. When Eleanor's turn came, she wheeled to the microphone, surveying the diverse gathering. That represented a community united by water rather than divided by it. The underground river beneath our feet has been flowing for thousands of years, she began. Long before property lines were drawn or legal systems created to divide and allocate its waters. What we do today is not revolutionary, it's restorative. We're realigning our human systems with the natural systems they depend on. Eleanor gestured toward the research center visible in the distance. 6 months ago, a catastrophic failure revealed what had been invisible. Today, we make visible something equally important: our commitment to stewardship rather than exploitation, to cooperation rather than conflict. She turned slightly to acknowledge Richard Blackwood. This journey has taught me that true progress doesn't come from defeating opponents, but from transforming relationships. Mr. Blackwood and I began as adversaries, representing seemingly incompatible visions for this valley. Today, we sign this compact as partners, having discovered that sustainable development and environmental stewardship aren't opposing values, they're interdependent necessities. Blackwood nodded in acknowledgement, his expression reflecting the genuine respect that had developed between them through months of intensive collaboration on the emergency response and subsequent policy negotiations. Eleanor continued, "When I was first paralyzed, people looked at my wheelchair and saw limitation. They couldn't imagine how I could possibly farm from this chair. What they missed was that my changed perspective allowed me to see problems and solutions that were invisible to others. My disability became my greatest strength as a farmer and water steward." She looked out at the gathered community members, many of whom had participated in the human chain demonstration that had so dramatically visualized the connection between water and people 6 months earlier. The same principle applies to communities. When we embrace diverse perspectives, indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, practical experience, entrepreneurial innovation, we discover solutions that none of us could find alone. The water compact we signed today isn't just about managing a resource. It's about harnessing the power of collective intelligence to address our greatest challenges. As Eleanor concluded her remarks, Richard Blackwood approached the microphone. The former adversary had undergone his own transformation since the sinkhole incident. The crisis had forced him to confront the limitations of his company's approach, and to recognize that genuine sustainability required deeper engagement with community and ecological realities. When I first came to Saguaro Valley, Blackwood began, I saw it primarily as a development opportunity. I understood water as a resource to be efficiently allocated and managed. What I failed to appreciate was that water isn't just a resource, it's the foundation of community, the lifeblood of ecosystems, and a heritage belonging to past and future generations. He glanced at Eleanor with genuine appreciation. It took a crisis and the remarkable leadership of Eleanor Wilson to help me see what was missing from our approach. The Sustainable Communities project we're now developing looks nothing like our original plans, and it's infinitely better for that evolution. Blackwood outlined how Horizon's development model had been fundamentally redesigned, shifting from large-scale water extraction to an integrated approach that preserved the natural flow of the underground river while introducing advanced conservation technologies, densified housing to minimize footprint, and agricultural innovation zones developed in partnership with the cooperative. The Water Compact we signed today represents a new model not just for Arizona, but for the entire Southwest, Blackwood concluded. It demonstrates that development and conservation aren't opposing forces. They're complementary necessities in a world of increasing water scarcity. As the signing ceremony proceeded, each participant adding their signature to the historic document, Eleanor reflected on the unexpected path that had led to this moment. The flash flood that had taken her mobility at 17 had seemed like the end of possibilities. Instead, it had been the beginning of a journey that had transformed not just her life but an entire community's relationship with water. Following the formal ceremony, attendees moved to the research center for a tour of the educational exhibits and monitoring systems. Eleanor found herself alongside Dr. Washington from the Water Resources Board, who had played a crucial role in the policy negotiations following the crisis. "You know," Dr. Washington remarked as they observed the real-time flow displays, "what you've accomplished here goes far beyond water management. You've created a governance model that could be applied to other complex resource challenges: energy transitions, climate adaptation, ecosystem restoration." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "The principles are transferable: shared stewardship, inclusive governance, alignment with natural systems, technology in service of sustainability rather than extraction. But it took a crisis to create the openness to radical rethinking." "That's often how transformation happens," Dr. Washington replied. "The question is whether other regions will learn from Saguaro Valley's experience or require their own crises to catalyze change." As they continued through the center, Eleanor was approached by a young woman in a wheelchair, a graduate student from the university's Water Resources program who had been involved in the research collaboration. "Ms. Wilson," the student said, her expression earnest, "I just wanted to thank you. When I started my studies, I was told that fieldwork would be challenging for someone in my situation. Your work here has changed that conversation completely. The accessible monitoring systems you've designed have opened doors for researchers like me." Eleanor smiled with genuine pleasure. "The best innovations often come from necessity. My wheelchair didn't limit my ability to understand water systems. It changed my perspective in ways that proved valuable. Never let anyone convince you that your difference is a disadvantage." The afternoon continued with discussions, demonstrations, and community celebrations. As evening approached, Eleanor made her way to a quiet spot overlooking the valley, seeking a moment of reflection amid the activity. To her surprise, she found her father already there, gazing out at the transformed landscape. "Quite a day," Jack Wilson said as she joined him. "Your mother would be proud." "Hell, I'm proud enough for both of us." Eleanor followed his gaze across the valley where the setting sun illuminated fields that were thriving despite the continuing regional drought. The cooperative's innovative water conservation methods had been scaled across the region, while the research center was developing new, drought-resistant cultivation techniques in partnership with university agricultural programs. It's not what I imagined when I was 17, Eleanor acknowledged. But then, imagination is limited by what we know is possible. Sometimes it takes impossibility to push us beyond those limits. Jack nodded, his weathered hand finding hers. When your accident happened, I thought our family's connection to this land was ending. I couldn't see how you could farm from a wheelchair, couldn't imagine the innovations you'd create because of not despite that challenge. The flood took my mobility but gave me a different way of seeing, Eleanor replied. And that new perspective turned out to be exactly what was needed, not just for our farm but for the entire valley. Their conversation was interrupted by Carlos, who approached with tablet in hand. Eleanor, the governor is asking if you'd join a video call with the Interior Secretary. They want to discuss expanding the water trust model to other watersheds in the Southwest. Eleanor nodded, giving her father's hand a final squeeze before wheeling back toward the research center. The day's events marked not an ending but a beginning, the first step in a larger transformation of how communities throughout the arid Southwest might relate to water, to land, and to each other. As she entered the center's main hall, Eleanor was struck by the diverse gathering of people who had once been on opposite sides of seemingly intractable conflicts: tribal leaders and corporate executives, environmental advocates and development planners, urban water managers, and rural farmers. The underground river had connected them physically for centuries, but it had taken crisis and collective response to make that connection visible and meaningful. The video call with federal officials lasted over an hour, with Eleanor explaining how the Saguaro Valley approach might be adapted to other contexts. As the discussion concluded, the Interior Secretary made an unexpected announcement. Ms. Wilson, in recognition of your groundbreaking work, the President has asked me to invite you to join the newly formed National Water Resilience Commission. Your perspective would be invaluable as we develop strategies for addressing water security challenges nationwide. Eleanor accepted the appointment with characteristic humility, recognizing it not as personal recognition, but as an opportunity to amplify the principles and practices that had emerged from Saguaro Valley's journey. Later that evening, as the celebration continued under desert stars, Eleanor found a moment alone with Richard Blackwood on the research center's observation deck. The former adversaries stood in companionable silence, watching the lights of the valley communities twinkling in the distance. "I've been thinking about our first meeting," Blackwood said finally. "When I looked at you, I saw only the wheelchair. I made assumptions about your capabilities, your authority, your vision for this land." Eleanor nodded, acknowledging the candor of his reflection. "Most people do at first. It's human nature to categorize based on visible differences. But that's exactly what limited my thinking about this entire valley," Blackwood continued. "I saw only what it could become according to my predetermined vision, not what it already was or what it might become through a more inclusive process." He turned to face her directly. "The irony is that if I had actually listened to you from the beginning, if I had recognized the value of your different perspective rather than dismissing it, Horizon would have developed a better project. From the start, we would have avoided the crisis and created something truly innovative much sooner." "Perhaps," Eleanor agreed. "But transformation rarely follows straight lines. Sometimes we need to experience failure before we're open to fundamental rethinking." "The wheelchair philosopher," Blackwood said with a small smile, the comment reflecting not mockery, but genuine appreciation for her wisdom. "Just a farmer who had to learn new ways of seeing," Eleanor corrected gently. "Like you. Like all of us." As Blackwood was called away to another conversation, Maya joined Eleanor at the railing. The young agronomist who had believed in Eleanor's vision from the beginning had grown into a respected leader in her own right, recently appointed as research director for the new center. "I just got off the phone with officials from California," Maya reported excitedly. "They want to send a delegation to study our governance model." Apparently, the governor showed them the underground river visualization, and they were stunned by the implications for their own water systems. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. The 3D visualization technology that had begun as a desperate attempt to make the invisible visible for the water resources board had evolved into a powerful tool for helping communities everywhere understand the hidden connections beneath their feet. That's how change spreads, she observed. Not through argument, but through revelation, helping people see what was always there but remained invisible to them. As the evening deepened, community members gathered around a central fire pit for storytelling and celebration. Tribal elders shared ancient knowledge about the desert waters. University researchers presented new findings about aquifer dynamics, and farmers offered practical wisdom gained through generations of working with the land. Eleanor listened to this weaving of diverse knowledge systems, recognizing it as the true heart of what had been accomplished in Saguaro Valley. The Water Compact and Research Center were important, but they were merely structures built to support something more profound, a community reconnecting with its most essential resource and with each other across differences of perspective, background, and interest. As the gathering continued, a young girl approached Eleanor shyly, holding a school project, a detailed model of the underground river system made from recycled materials. "Ms. Wilson," she said, presenting her creation, "our teacher asked us to make something that showed what we learned about water this year. I made the river we can't see, but that connects us all." Eleanor examined the model with genuine interest, noting the careful attention to hydrological details and the creative use of materials. "This is remarkable work. You've captured something very important, that understanding often begins with making the invisible visible." The girl beamed with pride. "My mom says before the sinkhole, people argued about water all the time because they couldn't see how it connected everything. Now we can see it, so we can protect it together." "Out of the mouths of children," murmured Eleanor's father, who had approached her in the conversation. "The wisdom we adults sometimes take decades to discover." As the celebration continued under star-filled skies, Eleanor found herself surrounded by the community that had formed around a shared vision of water stewardship. The journey had been neither straight nor easy, from the flash flood that had changed her life at 17, through years of innovation and struggle, to the crisis that had ultimately catalyzed unprecedented collaboration. The path forward would hold new challenges, Eleanor knew. The Water Compact was just the beginning of a long-term transformation in how humans related to water in an increasingly arid world. But looking around at the diverse gathering, farmers and scientists, tribal elders and corporate executives, government officials and community activists, she felt a profound sense of possibility. The underground river had flowed beneath this valley for millennia, connecting all life through invisible channels. Now that physical connection had been mirrored by human connection, a community united not by eliminating differences but by recognizing their interdependence despite those differences. 1 year later, Eleanor Wilson sat in her wheelchair on the main stage at the National Water Summit in Washington, D.C., preparing to address an audience that included policymakers, scientists, and community leaders from across the country. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the now famous 3D visualization of the Saguaro Valley underground river system, a technology that had been replicated for watersheds throughout the arid West, revealing hidden connections and transforming water management approaches. The past year had seen remarkable developments. The Saguaro Valley Water Trust had become a model studied by communities facing water challenges worldwide. The research center had grown into a hub for innovation in conservation technology, regenerative agriculture, and participatory water governance. Most importantly, the cooperative approach pioneered in Arizona had begun spreading to other watersheds, facing similar pressures. As Eleanor wheeled to the microphone, she surveyed the diverse audience. Many had traveled thousands of miles to learn from the Saguaro Valley experience, not just the technical innovations, but the social process that had transformed conflict into collaboration. 5 years ago, Eleanor began, most people in my community viewed water primarily as a resource to be extracted and consumed. Today, we understand it as a relationship to be nurtured, a connection that sustains all life and binds us to each other across differences of perspective, interest, and identity. She gestured toward the visualization behind her. Making the invisible visible was the first step in our journey. But the more profound transformation came when we recognized that water challenges cannot be solved through competition, only through collaboration across traditional boundaries. Eleanor shared the story of Saguaro Valley's journey from drought and conflict through crisis and collaboration to the unprecedented partnership that now governed the region's water. She emphasized that the technical solutions, while important, had been secondary to the social innovation of inclusive governance, aligned with natural systems rather than arbitrary boundaries. What happened in our valley isn't just about water, she concluded. It's about recognizing that our greatest challenges, whether water scarcity, climate change, or social division, cannot be addressed through fragmented approaches or win-lose thinking. They require us to make visible the connections that have always existed beneath the surface of our separate lives, and to build governance systems that honor those connections. As applause filled the hall, Eleanor noticed a group of young people in wheelchairs seated in the front row, engineering and environmental science students from universities across the country. Their presence reminded her of how far things had come since her own youth, when a wheelchair had been seen primarily as a limitation rather than a unique vantage point. After the presentation, Eleanor met with this group, listening to their questions and ideas with genuine interest. One young man, an engineering student developing accessible environmental monitoring technology, asked about her journey from paralyzed teenager to national water policy innovator. "The flash flood that took my mobility was devastating," Eleanor acknowledged, "but it also gave me a perspective that proved essential for addressing the challenges we faced. Sometimes what appears to be our greatest limitation contains the seed of our unique contribution." She gestured toward the diverse group. "Your different experiences of the world aren't obstacles to overcome, they're valuable perspectives that can help us see solutions invisible to others. The future of water management and of our response to all complex challenges depends on our ability to integrate diverse ways of knowing." As the summit continued over the following days, Eleanor participated in working sessions with communities facing water challenges across the country. From drought-stricken California to flood-prone Mississippi, from industrial pollution in the Great Lakes to groundwater depletion in the High Plains, the patterns were similar: fragmented governance, conflict over competing uses, and growing threats from climate change. Yet in each context, Eleanor saw possibilities for transformation, similar to what had occurred in Saguaro Valley. The key was helping communities see the connections beneath the surface, not just hydrological connections but social, economic, and ecological relationships that transcended traditional boundaries. On the final day of the summit, Eleanor was surprised by an unexpected announcement. The Interior Secretary approached the podium with a proclamation from the President, designating the Saguaro Valley Underground River System as the nation's first hydrological heritage area, a new category of protected landscape that recognized the cultural, ecological, and scientific significance of water systems. This designation honors not just a natural resource, the Secretary explained, but a community's journey from conflict to collaboration, from extraction to stewardship. The Saguaro Valley model demonstrates that environmental protection and human development aren't opposing forces, they're interdependent necessities in an increasingly water-stressed world. As Eleanor accepted the proclamation on behalf of the Saguaro Valley community, she reflected on the long, winding path that had led to this moment. The wheelchair that many had seen as the end of her future had become the platform from which she had gained a unique perspective on water, on land, and on the connections that sustained all life, The flash flood that had seemed like tragedy had ultimately revealed truths about water that might otherwise have remained invisible until crisis made them impossible to ignore. And the conflict that had divided her community had transformed into collaboration that now inspired communities worldwide. As the summit concluded, Eleanor prepared to return to Arizona, where the daily work of water stewardship continued. The national recognition was gratifying, but the true measure of success was visible in the thriving farms, restored desert springs, and collaborative governance that now characterized Saguaro Valley. The underground river continued to flow as it had for millennia, connecting all life in the valley through invisible channels. But now those physical connections were mirrored by human connections, a community that had learned to see beneath the surface of difference to the shared dependence that united them all. Eleanor's journey from paralyzed teenager to water visionary had transformed not just her life, but the lives of thousands who depended on the underground river. Her unique perspective, gained through challenge rather than despite it, had helped an entire community discover that the path to water security lay not in conflict, but in connection, not in division, but in relationship. And as communities across the arid West began their own journeys of water revelation and transformation, the ripples from Saguaro Valley continued to spread, proving that sometimes the most powerful innovations emerge not from abundance, but from scarcity, not from strength, but from vulnerability, not from separation, but from connection. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.